Welcome back to the Rogue Trader podcast, and today I'm joined by the risk and compliance expert Oonagh van den Berg. But today we're going to be talking about scams, and in particular we're going to be looking at the way that the banks are treating their customers. It's not just banks, it's financial institutions, and there's a few things that we've come across over the last couple of weeks that are really alarming and need to be broadcast. Really, this is the way that certain of our clients are being treated by their banks in terms of victim blaming. It's your fault. You shouldn't have done it. We're not really offering you any form of protection, and go on your way. So one of the most startling things, I suppose, Oonagh, came from one of the English banks, where when a scam was reported to them and it was explained to them, they came back to the customer, and I'm reading here, if we reported these payments, we would have to report you as both the victim and the suspect, and you would be subject to all the ramifications of being treated as a suspect, such as freezing your accounts and your funds, referral to law enforcement, being reported as a suspect to other other banks, making it harder for you to open financial products in the future. Unbelievable.
Yeah, it's really I think what we could actually say is it's shaming, victim shaming. And it was like, one of the things that I think we're both in agreement, we're not here to dispute the outcome of the decision of the bank itself. They followed their internal procedures, protocols, but it's the language and way in which the language has been used, Nick. And these individuals have been, through no intention of themselves, victims of scams. And, there comes with that a psychological aspect of embarrassment, of shame, which they're carrying with them. And now they're trying their best to see whether or not they can recoup some of the losses, not all, but some of the losses. And, one of the recourse available to them naturally is to go to these financial institutions whom they've banked with their entire lives, and who, they've dutifully paid their credit card fees, any interest on their accounts, you name it, all of that has been paid. And then they go to them to say, hey, like this happened. I'm really embarrassed. Can you help me? And the response is, oh, if we help you, we're going to have to treat you as a suspect, and then you may not be able to open a bank account again elsewhere. So kind of just shut up and move on. And the question is, how many people are receiving responses like this? Is it a numbers game where you're like, you know what, if we respond to 10 people in this way, maybe only 3 will have the courage to come back again and push back? And one of the things in that letter that really stood out for me as well was when the transfer was made from the individual's account, they put it in the description, me to me.
Yeah.
And the bank came back and said, and the refund we were looking for here was under the APP, the authorized push payment scheme. And the bank came back and said, because they had entered that description, it immediately voided the APP's capability to cover the loss, which is absolutely incorrect. There is precedent. So, it was just like you're shaming the victim, and you're actually telling them it's your fault you can't get the money back because you put the wrong words in. So, so toddle on. And it was, as I said, I'm not disputing the decision by the bank, but what I am disputing is the language and the verbiage that's used.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think the big thing here is, as you've said many times, it's about education. If you've got all of these scams going on, right, and these scams are facilitated by experts, right? If you and I know you don't work an 8-hour day, and I don't work an 8-hour day either.
Try and work less now, Nick, if I can.
Yeah, well, you should. But but if we were working an 8-hour day, we would still be at work far less than the scammers. Right, these guys are on it 24 hours a day. They're continually manipulating what they're doing. They're changing it up, and they're keeping ahead of everything that's going on. So if you get a situation where, as you're doing, and as I know you do from day to day, if you're trying to educate people about scams and the things that are going on, if you're receiving those sort of letters, people aren't going to come forward. So, you know, the scammers get this sort of immunity whereby they can do what they're doing because nobody's aware of what they're doing. And they just continue with that immunity as far as they want to. And there's more and more cases, but it's just like, it's shocking. I mean, I've worked for banks, you've worked for banks, and you know, everybody has a different perspective of them. But I think we hold them in such regard, and I think this is part of the issue for me. And I've mentioned this once or twice before, but we hold them in such regard historically. Maybe not so much these days, that we don't really challenge them. We don't ask questions. And then if you get that sort of letter back, which says, you know, you might be accused of breaking the law, we might need to freeze your bank accounts, you're going to be a suspect, you know, you're just not going to go any further. So yes, I think it is a numbers game. You know, you send out 10 of those letters, you know, maybe one person is brave enough to go forward and challenge what the bank is saying. And
remember the day, I was actually saying, somebody was saying that to me this week, you know, about how there was a day and age where, you know, we revered, as you said, we held in such high esteem, like, you know, airline pilots and bank managers. And nowadays it's kind of like, oh, you're an airline pilot, so you're just like a taxi driver in the sky. You know, we've completely changed, and bank managers were all like, oh, you work in a bank? Oh, you know, the eyebrow kind of moves a little bit. So no, but you're absolutely right. It's you know, and there's one example, and I know we've both been working on it. You know, we have a 90-year-old gentleman. I don't know if you want to touch on that one now.
Yeah, sure.
You know, he's 90 years old and became a victim of quite of a sophisticated scam, and this has caused a lot of mental stress. This individual has lost their entire life savings. And we have another example that's even more severe than this one. But this individual at 90 years old has lost their entire retirement fund, wouldn't even tell the family what had happened. And it was actually the family only found out by accident. So that, you know, they then kind of contacted us about it. And so we've been helping them to kind of go through the roots of, well, so who do you contact? And there's a couple of banks involved. And what's been really, really interesting and such an eye-opener for me was a couple of things. One, with one of the banks, the gentleman used for 2 payments his credit card. And as we all know, credit cards are protected for fraud. And you pay a premium on your credit card for that, in addition to obviously the access to the funds. What happened was the bank came back and said, okay, you've lost, let's say, 90,000 euros in this case, but 10,000 was spent on your credit card, so we can reclaim the monies. So the bank went through the motions and got back the 10,000. But wait for it. The client was funded with 5,000 into their account. The other 5,000 the bank keeps.
You're joking me.
No. And I was just like, I don't understand. But the money came with a caveat. You can hold on to this for a maximum of 180 days. And if you don't hear from us within 180 days, you can keep it. But we have the right to reverse this decision within 180 days. So we would advise you not to spend the money.
But still the 5,000 stays with the bank, regardless.
Regardless. And I'm like, hey, wait a second. So the bank is insured, the client is only 50% insured. And the question I have is, where is this money going in respect to the bank? Now, it gets even better. So they've gone into the branch and they've said to the bank, we would like for each of these wire transfers outside of the credit card, but the wire transfers that have been sent, we'd like them each to be investigated. For each wire transfer, they've had to pay 30 euros to the bank for their admin fees.
Unbelievable.
To investigate a financial crime. So you have a 90-year-old man who's just like every other person on the street, who has lost his entire life savings, and the bank is keeping 50% of what he lost on the credit card. And for the residual, 80,000, he's having to pay for the various transactions. And there was a number of them. So let's say 10 transactions. He's having to pay an additional, 300 euros in order to get this investigated.
And he's probably been a client of that bank for
forever.
For decades.
Since he is 18 years old.
Yeah, so there's nothing for loyalty, sticking with your
Nothing.
bank and making sure that you observe all the rules and, like you say, pay all of your interest fees and mortgage fees and
Yeah.
interest that you're paying over all those sort of years. If you actually stood back and you looked at it and you think, how much have I paid this bank in fees over the years, and they're still trying to take another 5 grand off of him for the credit card and another set of fees for the other side.
It's absolutely disgraceful, Nick. It really, really is. And it's also incredibly sad, as you rightly said. Like this individual, he's had his entire life cycle with this bank. So, when he started out as a new kind of graduate, when he's, got married, got his first home, got his mortgage, got a car loan, kids going through school, university, all of his financial products and financial needs have been serviced by this bank, which he's paid a premium for. At 90 years old, having lost his entire life savings, the bank's attitude is, you pay us to take a look at it.
And you know what?
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
So I was just going to say on that point, and you'll remember this as well. Like banks focus on you so much when you're 18 years of age or 19 years of age, and you're at university, and they turn up with those free gifts, whatever they are, piggy banks or whatever other rubbish they're giving out these days. But they want you as a customer because most of you stay with that bank forever.
Yeah.
But then the degree of loyalty or the degree of repayment for that loyalty is, the shit they're giving this guy now. And I apologize for using that word, but he's probably a 70-year customer of the bank. He's 90 years of age. He should be reveling in his retirement, and yet the bank is still legging him over.
Absolutely. And I had a Henry Hippo when I was younger. I loved my Henry Hippo. So I've still got it somewhere, I'm sure.
I think they're expensive now if you've still got
them. Are they? Oh God,
yeah,
by that I should get rid of it. But no, one of the other things that really shocked me was, so this is a 90-year-old who's been scammed through a sophisticated crypto scam.
Yeah.
And he was asked to set up an account with a crypto firm and then transfer the monies over. Now, 90 years old, as you've rightly said, he's been with this bank for 70 years. So they've seen every transaction that he's done. Yeah. And suddenly he's transferring over 90K to a crypto account out of the blue. Not one fraud alert, not one transaction monitoring alert, not one phone call from the bank to say, oh, wait a second, a vulnerable individual, 90 years old, and nobody thought to themselves, oh, that's a bit strange. He suddenly started doing like rampant crypto investments with his entire life savings. And it's just like, where does the ownership of responsibility? Don't get me wrong. Banks aren't responsible for your investment decisions, when you're making them independently. But a 90-year-old man who suddenly isn't sending money to a crypto firm, in my experience, having worked in financial institutions, having developed fraud and transaction monitoring systems, this should have been a red light. There should have been alarm. It's a bit like in The Simpsons whenever Homer tries to get the car loan. There should have been a flashing light going off somewhere saying, what the hell is happening? None of these protections were afforded to a vulnerable individual. The bank's controls seemingly failed. And it gets even better. Like literally, you could write a story about this. So in the banks here in Portugal, this thing called the Big Red Book. And no, it's not This Is Your Life. It literally is. If you're serious about a complaint, you say, give me the Big Red Book. And they know. And you write in that book why you're angry or why you're upset. So the family, there's, exactly. So the family, there's no Michael Parkinson, anybody involved, which is really unfortunate. So basically they asked for a copy of the Big Red Book and they made a complaint. Now, the bank is still investigating the wire transfers. But the complaint goes straight to the BDP, which is the Central Bank of Portugal, which is the regulator here.
Right.
They've already received a response from BDP to say that the BDP is of the opinion that the bank's handling of the complaint is fully aligned to their expectations and the outcome of the complaint they agree with. What outcome? There's been the bank is telling the client that they're still investigating, but according to BDP, this is all done. So can somebody tell me what is going on here where you have your regular Joe on the street, 90-year-old individual who has been scammed out of his life savings. And the central bank is saying, not our problem. We actually agree with the bank. The bank is saying, we're still investigating, but you're going to pay us for it. Then they go to the police. Oh, and then they have to get a police number as well. And so they had obviously to report this to the police. So the police said, look, we've no available staff right now. It's going to take about a month because there's other scams, etc. So they have to wait a month. They then go back to the police station. It's going to take 6 months to meet an investigator because the police currently have on average 200 scams assigned to 8 different officers individually. So each officer has 200 cases, and these date back to at least 2022.
And again, it goes back to that whole thing that we said at the beginning. People aren't going to come forward if you're getting stopped every step of the way. There's so many hurdles to overcome. Yeah. And like if he was in the UK and he got a letter from HSBC, this 90-year-old man would also be a suspect, and he'd probably be in prison by now in Portugal if they took the same sort of process.
But it's just crazy. It's absolute insanity, and it's like there are roadblocks being set up in front of you along the way, and it's like and what's the really worst part of this is this individual, this 90-year-old man, to start with, was so embarrassed, was so shamed, was going into depression because of it. Then suddenly there was light at the end of the tunnel because it was like, actually, things are moving. We're going to start seeing money. And now all of these other roadblocks have been hit. Psychologically, it's really impacted this individual, and they're going downhill. And at 90 years old, in those situations, this can be life or death. Like, I know it's extreme, but that's the truth of it. Like, the individuals become so consumed with depression, they've lost everything, there's embarrassment. So, you mentioned it earlier, and you're absolutely right. Education here is key. Where we can't stop the evolution of financial crime, especially with the sophistication of the crimes we're seeing. The psychological, that was another thing as well. The psychological impact. So when this individual stopped picking up the phone to the scammers continued to call. So his daughter picked up the phone instead. And she was telling me about the other day, the abuse that she was getting from these individuals. You will not get your investment if you don't send the money. And it started to become very aggressive, very, very abusive. So you're dealing with all of these elements. And the question is, where is the underlying education so that people are aware? Because of education, people can inform themselves and make informed decisions before they get stuck into these investments.
If you remember, and it was a case we didn't proceed with at the time, but there was a case before in Canada, and it was, again, it was one of those online investment platforms, and they'd managed to get a couple of these ladies involved in some of the investments, so to speak, that they were offering out at that particular point. But it's like you said, when things go wrong and they're still looking, or not when things go wrong on their behalf, but when you realize you've lost money and you're trying to get that money back, they do get aggressive. It was almost racist, some of the comments that they were offering over the line, and it was, very, very difficult for those people to deal with. And like you said, with a vulnerable 90-year-old man, it's just absolutely shocking. But the key part, and I hate to repeat myself, you're not going to get people coming forward, and you're not going to get the education if the banks keep treating people like this. It's almost as if you feel like a pariah for bringing a complaint up to the bank. And then if you get a situation where the ombudsman or whoever the regulator is, in your case in Portugal, where they're giving you a decision when the bank hasn't even looked at the case fully yet, that adds an extra level of difficulty in it that nobody's really.
Obscurity, like it's really, really obscure. And and I'm just, what I'm seeing, if you take a step back and you look at this objectively, is that they're absolutely inundated. Nobody can see the wood for the trees right now. And I do feel in the UK, I do feel for the banks, if I can say that a little bit, under this APP scheme.
Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't feel sorry for them.
But why I feel sorry for them is that the APP scheme was introduced last year, and we didn't have sufficient data to support the numbers of the actual scams that were happening. We were seeing probably around 15 to 20% of scams that were actually happening because people weren't coming forward for various reasons. Now this scheme has been introduced. A number of people are suddenly realizing, hey, wait a second, there's something I can do about this. And the numbers have I wouldn't even say quadrupled. We've just exploded. And the banks are in a position now where it's like, well, we agreed to sign up to this based on the data and the figures before, but now we've just been inundated. And, they're not, to be fair to the banks, they're not an open wallet, for everybody and their mother. And we're also seeing, like anything, people using these scams to make money themselves. So, people coming along and pretending they've been scammed and then sharing the monies that they get paid out. So, and that's always going to happen. And I don't want that to be the icebreaker here where people are like, oh, actually, there's a risk to the bank, because that's unfortunately the rabbit hole people will go down.
Yeah.
The bottom line here is we didn't have the right data in the UK. We made a decision to roll out the APP scheme, but the scheme itself, I'm yet to see anybody that's successfully been reimbursed by it. But that's just I know there have been a couple of cases, but I've not seen any firsthand. And these responses that we're getting from the banks, the UK, and also the situation in Portugal, they're very, very telling in that the question is, who's protecting the individuals? Who has the obligation to protect them, and what is their recourse, if any, even to the FOSS? And maybe moving on to like one other case that we've dealt with, one individual, he's lost over 1.2 million in terms of losses through a scam. And all of this money was structured. It was sent out, and was actually sent out in 9 different payments to accounts in Hong Kong. And I'm just saying the typology because it's important we talk about the typology. And also the reimbursement of these schemes, some of them where the monies have gone outside of the country, you can't get it back because there's limitations, etc. And, if anybody, especially the bank in question in the UK, a different bank from the letter, if they had properly looked at the activity, they would have been questioning, why are these payments going out to 7 different banks, to 9 different people, and some of the addresses were the same, but the names were different. And then if you even just Googled the address, you would see that this was a unit in a UV lit back street shopping complex, in inverted commas, with next door to a karaoke bar and a spa, etc. And you're just like, none of this makes any sense whatsoever. But nobody is stopping these payments.
No, I mean, you and I, you more so than me, you know that the banks are populated by AML and fraud specialists, right? Nobody on our side of the equation these days, or from the retail perspective, has any degree of or minor experience from an AML and fraud perspective. So you do rely on the bank. Yeah. They have a duty of care. I understand it's tough for them, but they need to do more. And there are genuine cases, and the cases that we're talking about are genuine cases. And I don't think that you could ever arrive at any other conclusion. But still, the bank will delay you. Yeah. In the hope, the only hope that I can believe that they're looking for is that you go away, that you stop the process, that you stop annoying them, and that they don't have to do anything more with it. I think that letter that we read out at the beginning is a perfect example of that. It's just delay, delay, delay. And then you get as far as the Ombudsman and talking about the case where it was £1.2 million. We're still waiting for an answer. They've got all of the information that they want from us. They've confirmed that about 4 or 5 times. The bank is slowly releasing information to them. It's another vulnerable person. He isn't 90 years of age, but he's in his mid to late 60s, and vulnerable, but they're still sitting on their hands, and it takes an awful long time.
It could take up to 2 years now. This is what's this case. Obviously, we've been working on. It's been over 9 months now. I think maybe even more. But
Yeah.
but it's just, and even going into the FOSS in the UK, you submit the the response to, or the response. You submit the complaint to the FOSS. Then they have to assign it to an investigator who then needs to look into it, and then they need all of the details. So it's just a constant post-mortem. One of the things actually I forgot to mention on the 90-year-old gentleman's scenario was that whenever the money was sent out from Portugal, it was actually still within Europe, and it was actually going to Malta. So it was sent to Malta to a crypto platform, and when the complaint was then sent to the crypto platform to say, hey, this account was opened for a 90-year-old gent. By the way, crypto firms, majority of them, if not all, actually have special transaction monitoring scenarios for elderly people. So you've suddenly got a 90-year-old man who's opened this account, no questions asked whatsoever, but their response was, we're not liable because we were just following your instructions. Now, what they weren't aware of was that this elderly man's crypto platform had been accessed on his mobile device via AnyDesk. So the fraudsters were actually the ones controlling the movement of the money. So the minute that he sent the money over to crypto.com, the fraudsters were going in via AnyDesk into his crypto.com platform. Sorry, I've just named the name. There you go. Into the crypto.com platform, and they were making the payments. Now, in defense to crypto.com, even with behavioral analytics of using your phone, if the individual wasn't the one making or using the device and it was via AnyDesk, they wouldn't have been able to identify one way or the other who it was, because it's all been done, and there was no previous account activity to basically allow them to understand the behaviors of the usage of the mobile device. So there are providers out there in the market where various companies are now employing this, where if I hold my phone like this, they can tell it's me on my phone. But if my phone is sitting up like this here, and it's a scam thing, they'll know automatically because the phone's not moving. So all of this capability and functionality is there. But if you're accessing it via AnyDesk, but to be fair, the phone would still be sitting down. So anyway, I'm going down the technical route. The bottom line here is the response from the crypto firm is, we're also not liable. You instructed the payments. End of story. And it's so where do you go? Where do you go with this?
Well, I think they go to you, Oonagh, is the answer.
Cheers.
Because you're only working 8 hours a day. There's plenty more hours. There's plenty more hours in the day, and you can do more.
I can absolutely. I'm so lazy.
No, I'm only joking, and we know that. But the key thing is that people need to keep coming forward. It's the only way to educate people. If people sit on their hands and they do nothing about these scams, and they suffer the embarrassment, and that leads them to do nothing, other people are not going to become aware, and that's the only way to stop it. Unfortunately, people need to be made aware of what people are doing. It is exceptionally sophisticated. There is recourse. It isn't always straightforward, but we do encourage people to come.
Absolutely. And if anything, just use this podcast as an education tool in terms of the typologies. If you're being promised a quick investment, if you're being contacted, cold called by somebody asking you, that you're a guaranteed return, there are no guarantees on any returns.
Unless it's me.
Unless it's Nick, then 100% give him a call. If somebody is saying you'll get like 10%, or a times 10 or whatever, these are all red lights. Even my own 100%. Mother recently fell for a scam, which I'm mortified about. My sister called me yesterday about it, and she said, I said to Mommy, why didn't you speak to Oonagh? She goes, well, I did speak to her, but she doesn't. It's not a scam. It's not a. And I'm like, oh my God, she still doesn't believe it's a scam. And that's the problem, is they're made to believe, believe. And it's silly things. It's like, you need to pay tax to release this payment. And by that point, you've already put money in. Or they'll ask you to transfer the money to a completely legitimate platform, a crypto platform. And then they will move the monies themselves to another platform. That's a red light. In many cases, they will give you access to another platform where you will see your investment going up and up and up. That's a total scam. That's completely falsified on their side. There's nothing happening. They've just taken the money. So I think we need people just to be aware. There's romance scams, there's investment scams, there's investment scams that become romance scams. You know, if somebody sends you a picture of themselves riding a horse, or you know, I don't know, eating cupcakes. I don't know. Just be wary of it. You know, it's really sad what we're seeing. And I know that kind of we're jesting about some of it here, but the seriousness is in some situations we're unfortunately seeing that people are taking their own lives as a result of this because they've lost literally lost everything, and remortgaged their homes, sold their cars. They haven't got anything left, losing their jobs because they have to declare themselves bankrupt. You know, there's massive implications here, and this is the one thing is it doesn't just stop with the scam; it perpetuates itself, and there is a lasting impact. So what can we do better? We can educate. Education is the first frontier to protecting people. Whose responsibility is it to educate? That's the big question right now. The police force are trying to do education with limited resources whilst doing the investigations. You know, are the regulators doing enough to educate? I don't believe so. Are the banks doing enough to educate? I don't believe so. In the case of the UK bank at the beginning with the letter, they have a whole campaign about scams. And I referenced this to them when we responded. It was, you know, you talk about scams, but when somebody comes to you with the scam, you just tell them, you know, we're going to have to report you as an actual suspect if you proceed with this. And it's like, okay, so you're sending mixed messages to us. So what do we do? And where is the responsibility? I know AMLA is going to hopefully be doing a lot of work around education when it's set up, and that's European focused. And also with Ireland, with Europe, but what are we seeing in the UK? I'll be honest, very limited. Even sextortion, which is predominantly impacting young men, it's taken campaigning by the dead children's parents. And I say that so brashly because that's the real situation. Young men have taken their own lives as a result of the sextortion. And they've had to go and campaign Parliament to try and help put in place protections to stop it happening to other children. Like, and when I went to the UK government with a petition to ask them to give financial literacy education to our children to understand financial systems, especially with the evolution of the financial environment, their response was, education is divulged in the UK. It's a responsibility of, you know, Northern Ireland, Scotland, and then England and Wales. So if you want education, take it up with your local service provider.
I think what it comes down to, like, it's shocking what's going on. I think what it comes down to, Oonagh, is awareness, and the only way you're going to improve awareness is by people coming forward. So I think we'll end up here by, and I think this has been fascinating. It's absolutely shocking what's going on, and it does need to change, and change is going to be slow. But if it does happen, it will be powerful. So, you know, as much awareness as we can of things that are going on. If people do find themselves in a scam type situation, please come forward and speak to Oonagh and myself, and we'll do what we can in that regard. There are far too many of those. So just finishing on the podcast here, please subscribe, like, and share. Thank you very much, Oonagh, for being with us today. Insightful as ever. And you told me it was a holiday there today. It's a holiday.
It is. It's a bank. And then you asked, like, well, what holiday is it? And I went, Friday. I have no idea. We have a lot of public holidays here in Portugal. I think today's Liberation Day, I believe. But I could be wrong. I stand corrected. But yeah, we have many different holidays. This is the time of year where every other week there's a holiday. So you just lose sight of it. All I know is that the kids are at home. So somebody has closed the schools. That much I know.
Okay. All right. Look, enjoy your holiday, and we'll speak.
Thank you.
Public holiday, and we'll speak to you again soon. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thanks, Nick. Take care.
Cheers. Bye-bye.